Okay, today's video is going to just go over some practice problems with graphing parabolas that involve focus, a directrix, and a vertex, and finding those pieces of information as well as graphing them. So I wanted to provide you with a couple examples, and then we're going to go over a third example that will work its way backwards. So what if we give you the information like the focus vertex or directrix, and can you find the equation? And so it's just going one way and then going backwards. It shouldn't be too much. So remember, your goal in doing these type of problems is to go through a 4-step process. And that's first you want to get it into vertex form. Then you have to find the value of P, which I'll give you guys those equations. And then you're going to graph the vertex and the focus and the directrix. And lastly, you can graph the parabola using the table in your graphing calculator. So first step we need to do is get it into vertex form. Now, lucky for us, this particular problem is already in vertex form. But let's look at one that's not in vertex form. So if we look at number 1, this is not in vertex form. So what I told you guys can do is fill in the missing pieces. So you can see here that we have an A and we have our C, but we're missing our B. So we can put a placeholder in there to sort of make this look better. So I'm going to put the 0 in there for B. So you have 1/8 x squared plus 0x and then minus 1. The step to get it into vertex form is to group your x's. Okay, your a cannot be 1/8. It has to be 1, so what we do is we just divide both of these by 1/8. That'll cancel. That 1/8 will come out, and that'll leave me with x squared. 0 divided by 1/8 is just 0, so plus 0x. We leave some room to complete the square, and then minus 1. Now to complete the square, this piece right here, it's just half of your b squared. Well, half of 0 squared is still 0. So, and then finally, we're going to write it into factored form, which we call vertex form, which is y equals 1/8. Remember, factored form is just half your b, so lucky in this case, it's just 0, so x plus 0, and then minus 1. So now that it's in vertex form, that's step 1. Step 2 is to now identify our p. Our p is found by using the form p equals 1/4a. That's an equation that I gave you, and you will be given on any test or quiz. You'll be given that form. So P equals 1/4a. The reason why we use this is because we have the a. We have the a. It's right here. This is a. And so we can just substitute this in for a and find our P. So what this looks like is 1/4 times 1/8. Now with a quick check of our calculator, 1/4 times 1/8, you just do 4 times 1/8. Which you get 0.5, and then 1 divided by 0.5 is 2. So the p-value is 2. Almost there. Step 3 is to now graph your vertex, your focus, and your directrix. Now, we didn't actually mention the vertex, but we can find the vertex because now that we have this in vertex form, we know our vertex. So vertex is 0, -1. So now I'm going to plot these. If you look at here, if you're looking at the tasks, this is from the task cards link that's there on Canvas. We can identify our vertex is 0, -1. And when we go down here, it's the same thing, but I'm going to work with a graph. You'll see how this is the same thing. So I'm just going to look at the graph. So the vertex was at 0, 1. Or 0, -1. So we're going to go down here, 0, -1. we'll use a different color right there. 0, -1. Vertex. Our p-value was 2. Since this is a vertical parabola, we have not talked about horizontal or sideways parabolas yet. These are vertical parabolas, and our p is 2. I know that I'm going to have a point that's 2 up from the vertex and 2 down from the vertex. Now we'll talk about which one is which in a little bit. Right now it's not important which one is the focus and which one's the directrix. So now we go to step 4. And step 4, this is the easiest step of them all, and that is the step in which you just plug it into your graphing calculator and look at your table. So all we do now is go, and we can just use this equation right here. I'm going to put that into my graphing calculator. So what I get when I go to y equals, and I put in 1/8 x squared, let's see here, minus 1, and graph it. I can see how it looks on a graph, and then I can click my table, which is second, and graph, and find any whole number points. And I'm presented with a couple of them that I can use. One of them is 0, -1, which makes sense because that is my vertex. I've already plotted 0, -1s right there. But another one would be 4, 1. So I can go and plot 4, 1 on here. 4, 1. Now, knowing that parabolas are symmetrical, I know that I'm going to have a matching point on the other side. 1, 2, they have 1, 2, 3, 4 units away from there. 1, 2, 3, 4 units away from there, and there is the other point. So what this tells me from my vertex, it tells me that the graph goes something like this. And you could see it from your graph on your graphing calculator as well. Now it's time to identify the focus and the directrix. You have to understand that the focus needs to be inside the parabola. Think of a satellite dish. Okay, the satellite dish, the receiver's in front of the parabola, not behind it. That would not make any sense. So the focus is actually in front of the parabola, making the directrix behind it. And the directrix is actually a line, an imaginary line, so we just use a dashed line to identify the directrix. And that's it. So we're going to do one more, and then we'll look at one going backwards here. So you can, if you're more than welcome to stop, replay the video if you want. If you feel like you got it, you can stop. But we're going to do one more for practice, so if you'd like to do one more, we can. We're just going to look at number 2. Now, the nice thing about number 2 is it's already in vertex form. So I can skip step 1 and go right to finding our p-value. So if I look at number 2, we can find the p-value by using the form like we did before, p equals 1/4 times a, which in this case our a is 1/4. So it's 1/4 times 1/4. Well, 4 times 1/4 is just 1. 4 times a fourth. 4/4 is 1. And so you get 1/1, which is 1. Our p-value is 1. We also know our vertex. It's right here and right here. Remember that the parenthesis part is opposite, so our vertex is actually -2, 2. So now I'm ready to plot it. So let's go down here and plot these on the graph. -2, 2 puts my vertex right there. And with the p-value of 1, I know that since this is a vertical parabola, that I'll have a point up and a point down 1. And now the last thing to do is just put this in our graphing calculator and find some points. Now some of you might look at, well, Mr. G, I know my A is positive, so I know that this parabola is going to go up. If this number out here were negative, it would go down. I know the parabola is up, so Mr. G, I already know that the focus is the top one, which is fine. and the directrix is the bottom one. So this would be the directrix right here, which is fine. Or you can wait to the end and just see how it goes. But you'll see this parabola will go up. So I'm going to put this in my graphing calculator. I have -1/4, and then parentheses x plus 2 parentheses squared plus 2. And then, let's see, you got to make sure that you put the 1/4 in parentheses, and that's what I didn't do. There you go. Graph. There it goes. Let's look at the table, find a whole number point. It looks like the whole number point is 0, 3. So I can plot 0, 3. 0, 3 is right there. Knowing that our parabola is symmetrical, I know I'm going to have another point on the other side, and I can graph it. So there's our parabola. So that's example number 2. Now let's talk about how we go backwards. If we're given the vertex, given the focus, or given the directrix, how can we find the equation? So for that, we're going to flip over to the second page. If we look at the second page, let's take, for example, number 3. If we're going to do number 3, we're given the vertex and the focus. And so it might be easier actually to plot them on a graph. So if I plot them on a graph, vertex is -3, 2. So I go to -3 and 2 and put a point there. And the focus is at -3, 3. -3, 3. So that places my vertex here and my focus here. Remember that the value of P is just the distance between these. Remember, if we had the vertex and we found P, we just went that P distance. Look at the distance between your vertex and the focus. It's 1. That tells you that your P value is 1. So I already know, going up here, that I have a vertex of -3 and 2, and I have a P value which equals 1. Now, there is another form of the formula. So before, we were using the formula P equals 1/4A, right? But with a little bit of math, you can actually just flip these around. Since I need to find A and not P, I could put A on the outside and P on the inside and do the exact same thing. So knowing that my P value is 1, I can just substitute it in. So what I get is 1/4 times 1, which 1/4 times 1 is 1/4. So that means that my A value is 1/4. And now I'm ready to write the equation. Remember that standard form for a parabola is, or vertex form for a parabola is y equals a parentheses x minus h squared plus k, where you just need the h and the k, that's your vertex, and a, which we just found. So all I'm going to do is plug everything in. My vertex is up here, my P or my A value is right here, so I'm just going to substitute. Y equals, my A value is 1/4. My x value, my vertex is -3, so it's going to be +3 in here because it's in the parentheses, and plus 2. And that's how we get the equation from the information given. Hope this helps. You can practice the other problems in the task cards and see how you do. If you have any questions, we'll talk about those on Friday. Thanks.